Hey, it's Casual Jake, and today I'm bringing you another FNM report, a little video segment where I give you a deck tech on a deck that I'm taking to my local FNM. I tell you a little bit about the deck, I tell you how it performed, and just kind of my final thoughts on the deck, if I think it's a good recommendation for you. But before we get into it, before we start, I have to give a big shout out to this video sponsor, playingpioneer.com. Not only can you go there and find the accompanying article for this video, but you're also going to find a Pioneer tier list, other great articles by other great authors, including Casual Jake, but other great people there, and it's really just your one stop for everything Pioneer. So thank you, Playing Pioneer, and make sure that y'all go check out that website down in the description. So this week I decided to take on Mono Blue Spirits. Now I know what you're thinking now, isn't that kind of a tier deck? Usually you do off meta decks. Well, yes, it is growing up in the tier list, but it was an outlier for such a long time. I bought this deck when it was just $90, and it's grown all the way up to about almost 250. So while it is a meta deck, I got into it while it was kind of more obscure, more off meta, as I feel like a lot of people do, and they might not just have the pieces laying around. So if you have these pieces, this deck is really going to be awesome. I'll show you how to upgrade it, how to get it in working order. So we are doing Mono Blue Spirits, and this is a tempo style deck, very akin to the Mono Blue tempo list that we saw, where you're slapping Curious Obsession on things. And of course we're doing that here, and we're using everything that we're going to be doing has the ability to fly and spirit synergies. So let's talk about the deck, and we'll really get into the style of it. So first, I gotta talk about the 1-drops. We have an insane amount of 1-drops that are all powerful. What's great is all of our spells, all of our creatures are not only creatures, not only bodies, flying bodies, but they also have some really, really great abilities. That extends to our most powerful 1-drop, one of the most powerful 1-drops in the Pioneer meta right now, and that's Mausoleum Wanderer, a 1/1 flyer that says whenever another spirit enters the battlefield, Mausoleum Wanderer gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So it's gonna get bigger just to the end of turn, but we can sacrifice it and counter target instant or sorcery spell unless its controller plays X. Getting this down turn 1 puts our opponent on the back foot just from the beginning of the game, because we now have the ability to censor or more, make them have to pay for their non-creature spells, for their specifically their instants and sorceries, and it's going to get bigger and bigger as more spirits come out, specifically including our next 1-drop, Ascendant Spirit. Now I know what you're thinking, this doesn't fly, but it definitely has the ability to, as well as grow while we do it. So Ascendant Spirit is a 1/1 for 1, and for 2 snow mana, we can make this spirit into a spirit warrior with base power toughness 2/3. That 3 toughness is very important. It's going to get past a lot of shock abilities that we're seeing in red decks. So it gets, we're able to turn 1 play this, turn 2 potentially protect it and get away from their play with fire or their fiery impulse, stuff like that. Now, to do the next one, you have to have done the first one, but we can pay 3 snow mana into it, and then it becomes a 4/4 with a flying counter. So there's that flying, and then for 4 mana, we can do this multiple times. We can put 2 counters on it, and it gains whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. And each time that we pay into that, we're going to put more and more counters on this. I've even had a game that's going to come up later in this, where this is going to become an 8/8. Next up, we have the 1-drop Spectral Sailor, which has flash. Now, this deck plays really well at flash speed, able to get things in on our opponent's turn, and just whenever we have blue mana open, our opponent's going to have to think extra hard about what they're going to do, because they don't know exactly what we could have up our sleeve, including this 1-drop, which is a flying 1/1. It's the perfect spell to play on our opponent's end step. One of my favorite things to do is when we're on the draw, they play their first land and maybe a spell, we play our 1-drop, and then we say the classic island go. They don't know what's going on, they're playing around counter magic, they're playing around all kinds of stuff, and then on their end step, boom, Spectral Sailor. Now we have a body that can then go into our other stuff. To talk about the 2-drop spirits, we have Rattle Chains, one of our most important ones, because again, it's a body and it's a spell ability. It has flash, it's a 2/1 flyer that when it enters the battlefield, target spirit gains hexproof until end of turn. Now of course we can give this hexproof, but we can also use this on turn 2 to protect one of our 1-drops when our opponent does go in for the kill, when they go in for the fatal push, when they go in for the fiery impulse. We flash out the Rattle Chains and protect that, and kind of 2-for-1 them right there. This also has very important text, allowing us to cast other spirits as though they had flash. So this now instantly gives every spirit in our hand flash, invaluable resource going forward. We also play 4 copies of 𝐂𝐚𝐬𝐿. Again, another flyer. It's a 2/2 this time. This one can only block creatures with flying, but it doesn't really matter because a lot of times we're going to be using this second ability, or should I say this third ability, because I was flying this, and then we can tap 2 untapped spirits. Usually I'm tapping the 𝐂𝐚𝐬𝐿 to tap down a target creature that we don't control. So if our opponent is able to resolve a very big threat, something that's going to trample over us, or something that's going to be a problem, maybe a life gain creature, we don't want them to gain that life, we can use 𝐂𝐚𝐬𝐿 and another spirit to tap those down, or even use this and another spirit that we have untapped on our end step to tap down potential flying blockers that they may have to clear the sky so that we can get in there. Last but not least, we're playing our Lord effect, 4 copies of Supreme Phantom, simple 1/3 flyer that gives our other spirits +1/+1. What's great about this creature is it has a 3 toughness, again, dodging a lot of that 2 damage removal that we see in our red decks. Just being able to stick this, Mausoleum Wanderer turn 1, Supreme Phantom turn 2, we're able to swing with a 3/3. We can counter things. Now that Mausoleum Wanderer is making them pay 2 to counter their instants or sorceries. Just a great card, and definitely can end games if we get a air force of spirits going, drop a Supreme Phantom, and then Alpha Strike. Next up, I want to talk about the enchantment. When I say the enchantment, I mean this is the enchantment. In fact, it's seen such a price increase that I think a playset of this now costs you about $25. If not, I know they're at least $5 a pop, could be more, but at time of recording, that's about where they're at. This is Curious Obsession, a 1 mana enchantment that gives our creature +1/+1, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. At the beginning of your end step, if you didn't attack with a creature this turn, sacrifice Curious Obsession. So, of course, we want to put this on one of our flyers so that we can attack every turn in the sky, hopefully uninterrupted, draw cards, get in extra damage, and we don't have to sacrifice the Curious Obsession. The ultimate play is to 1-drop on turn 1, turn 2, play that Curious Obsession, and just start swinging, start gaining that card advantage. What's really great about this deck is it's really good at mulliganing because of Curious Obsession. If we know that we have a 1-drop into a Curious Obsession, we know we're going to be drawing our interaction, drawing our gas from there. Speaking of interaction, I need to talk about our instance right here. Again, we're playing at flash speed, baby. Like, we are always going to have something to say. That being said, our best, our kind of the premier counter spell in this deck is going to be Geist Light Snare, which is 2 and a blue, but we're never going to pay that because it says this spell costs 1 less to cast if we control a spirit. Duh, we're a spirits deck. We're going to have spirits. It also costs 1 less to cast if we control an enchantment. So it could be 1 blue mana if we have a spirit and a Curious Obsession. 1 mana counter, what, in this economy? Yes, I think so. We get to counter target spell unless its controller pays 3. This is really good for setting up the early game, really interrupting, putting them on the back foot, getting that tempo early in the game to where we can overcome them quickly and draw into even more counter magic. Of course, later in the game, they may have enough mana to pay for this, but we're trying to end the game before they even can pay, even think about paying 3 extra mana for their instants and sorceries. I'm sorry, this is any spell, not even instant sword. This is just their creatures. This is any spell. Next up, we have Lofty Denial. We're playing 2 copies of this, and it's a 2 mana spell that counters target spell unless its controller pays 1. What's great about this is it's always going to be available. We can always cast this for 2. But if we control a creature with flying, we counter that spell unless its controller pays 4. Again, who wants to pay an extra 4 mana just to cast their spell? They're not going to be able to do that. Sometimes the 1 isn't even going to be, something that they can pay, and we're going to be able to put them on the back foot. Now, I've loved this card since it's been introduced. It's really great in this deck. We're seeing a lot more spirits deck, and that is Slip Out the Back, which is an instant that says put a 1/1 counter on target creature. It phases out. So, of course, the obvious thing is this is going to help us protect our spirits. With lots of removal going on in the format, this is a great way to phase out our spirit and to grow them. Again, putting this on a Mausoleum Wanderer, now that body is an even bigger counter spell. Putting this on our Supreme Phantom pretty much means that they're not going to be able to remove it with damage, right? Strangles, it's going to get around Strangle now with that extra counter. It's going to get around all that stuff. But hear me out. I've also used this offensively. Again, big old flyer in the air. I have some spirits. I can't swing in. Wait, slip out the back. I'm just going to phase their creature out. Alpha Strike, get the kill. It doesn't even matter that I put the counter on. So there's a lot of ways to use slip out the back. And again, the high point of this deck is we always have something to say. We're playing at instant speed. We're playing at flash speed. when they see our mana is open, it's always going to make them think twice about their moves. The mana base for this deck is pretty simple. We are playing 18 snow-covered islands. Again, we need the snow so that we can boost up our Ascendant Spirit, but also so that we can activate the 4 copies of Faceless Haven that we have. Yes, you read that right. Faceless Haven is a 4/3 that can be activated for 3 snow mana. It has Vigilance, and it's all creature types, meaning it is also going to be one of our spirits. It's going to get pumped by Supreme Phantom. We can tap it for Shacklegeist. It's all kinds of great stuff. And what I love is the Vigilance. So if we have extra blue snow mana open, this Faceless Haven is going to stay open so that we can use it to spend it later for Geistlight Snare or Lofty Denial after it's attacked, which is really great. Last but not least, we're playing 1 copy of Otawara in the main deck. I've seen some decks where the Otawara is just in the sideboard, and sometimes they'll take out a Faceless Haven to put in the Otawara. 23 lands seems like a lot, but I think it's where this deck wants to be. We want to make sure that we're hitting our land drops, making sure that we always have mana up for interaction. So Otawara is just some more interaction for there. It's usually going to be a spell. Usually we're going to be channeling it to return the stuff, to bounce their stuff, and get in for the win there. Looking at the sideboard, I always recommend that your sideboard adjust if you're playing at your local events. You know, adjust your sideboard to what you know is going to be there. But this is pretty much the stock sideboard. I use this in my FNM because I'm starting to see a lot more meta decks like Mono Green Karn, Greasefang at my local events. So I like the standard kind of stuff. So this is a good starting point that you can adjust going forward. First off, we have 2 copies of Witness Protection. Love this. It gets creatures out of the sky. It makes them lose all of their abilities, turns them into a green 1 citizen with base power 1/1. And of course, the name is called Legitimate Business Person, which I think is just hilarious. But what's great about this is it takes care of things like the Eidolon of Great Revel. We're no longer taking damage from that. Elder Gargaroth, more like Legitimate Business Person, right? Just get those things out of the way. Get rid of their reach creatures. Get rid of their value creatures. The one thing to note, though, is 1/1 counters will stay on. So if you put this on something that has 1/1 counters, which will come up in the FNM report, they are going to keep those counters indeed. Next up, we run 3 copies of Aether Gust. Just absolute killer for the green matchups, even really good against the mono red. I love it. It's such a tempo play. It's almost worse than a counter because they either get to choose to put that on top of their deck, which sets them back, basically just time walks them, or we have to put it at the bottom of their library. So it just gets rid of that spell altogether. I think more powerful than a counter spell many of times. We run 1 Disdainful Stroke, really again for the ramp decks, for those big decks to counter those spells with converted mana cost 4 or greater just for 2. It's a straight up counter spell for those. We run 3 copies of Unlicensed Hearse, the premier graveyard hate right now in Pioneer. It's so great because not only do you get to tap it and exile 2 target cards, you get to choose the cards from a single graveyard, but it's going to become a crewable vehicle, and that's very relevant after board wipes and stuff. Maybe you can play something with power to crew this, swing in for the victory. It's really, really great. It protects against sweepers, you know, it gives us something to do, and it's just a great piece of graveyard hate. We also run 2 copies of Brazen Borrower in the sideboard. Again, a great flash speed flyer, but also just being able to return non-land permanents. In case they are able to stick something on the board and we do miss a counter spell, this Brazen Borrower is going to be able to let us, put it back in their hand and kind of undo the damage that they were doing and prepare. And maybe Brazen Borrow, Petty Theft, should I say, return to their hand and then hold up the counter till we can permanently get rid of it. Last but not least, we run 4 copies of Mystical Dispute. Just bring these in when you're playing blue. It's great against the mirror match. It's great against control matchups, just great against anything that's playing blue. 1 mana counter spell for them unless the controller plays 3, but even paying 3 just to counter other spells, if you're playing against Azorius, should I say, and they play a white spell, still a good counter just to have because the ceiling on it is just so high. Well, that's the deck for you, but now how did it go at my local FNM? Well, let's get into that as we get into the FNM report. So I took this to my local game store, the Game Closet here in Waco, Texas on July 8th of our year 2022, and we had a pretty good finish. We ended up in 3rd place out of 11, ended up going 3-1. It was definitely an interesting week because I had seen the rise of things like Mono Green Karn and Greasefang into my local meta. I thought this is a great way to attack the meta, and then we played like none of those decks, but I still think it had a great showing. We played a lot of our weaker matchups, which is great practice for us with this deck, and I still think the deck definitely has legs and there's reason to consider it. So let's talk about the rounds and kind of how they went. So in round 1, I played against Mono Red, which is probably one of our weaker matchups, and we ended up losing this 0-2. Hey, I mean, there's not much to say about this one. In game 1, we were on the draw, so we already started on the back foot, and Mono Red just did Mono Red things. They were able to one-drop, Monastery Swift Spear, Soulscar Mage, and again, since we started on the back foot, we really just didn't have a lot of time to recover and interrupt them, so they were able to just go big, burn us down before we could really establish a board, get things out of the way before we could establish, and won that first game really quickly. So in game 2, we decided to sideboard in the Aether Gust, slip out the back to protect our stuff, and Witness Protection to get rid of their threats. Like I said, I had saw Torbran in their first game, so I knew that was a great one to get rid of things like Eidolon of Great Revel, so that we can cast our spells without getting punished, without getting that extra 2 damage. And this game was a lot closer. We got them really close. In fact, I remember the end of the game got down. We were at 3 life and they were at 2 life, and that was thanks to, again, Witness Protectioning their Eidolon of Great Revel to make sure that it couldn't do extra damage to us, and we can actually establish a board. It was actually at the point where we were about to win. Opponent was out of cards. We had a board of spirits. They didn't have anything to swing at, and they went to top deck mode, and they top decked Lightning Strike of all things, and was able to put that final nail in our coffin there for 3 damage. Then in round 2, I played against a really cool 4-color elemental deck, and we ended up winning this 2-0. I really enjoyed seeing this deck because not only did it play 4-color Omnath, it also played 3-color Omnath. This was, when I say elemental, it was straight elemental. It had all kinds of stuff in it, including Risen Reef, Cloud Concealer, and even Healer of the Glade. It was just straight up elemental value, and it was a lot of fun to play against. So in game 1, we just happened to have the perfect tempo, and we actually took no damage the entire game. Started off with a Mausoleum Wanderer turn 1, a Supreme Phantom turn 2, and then we held up that counter magic, and we were able to counter our opponent's turn 3 Omnath. And then we dropped another Supreme Phantom, and we just started swinging and swinging. Double pumps was really great for us, and having those Supreme Phantoms kind of back to block any of their smaller elementals was really easy GG's for us on that one. Then in game 2, of course, we sided in the Aether Gust, which is going to be the theme for this one. Aether Gust just did work. Witness Protection, just in case they did resolve an Omnath, and even brought in that Disdainful Stroke, specifically to make sure that Omnath was not going to be a problem for us. And this one went fairly similar. We played a Ascendant Spirit first turn, and we were able to counter their Risen Reef on turn 3 that really hurt their card advantage. They did resolve 4-color Omnath after that and did swing in, but I don't know if they forgot or just didn't realize how big Faceless Haven was, so we activated Faceless Haven and we did chump block right there. Towards the end of the game, we were able to pay into our Ascendant Spirit. It actually ended up being an 8/8 flyer that drew us cards. It even had the Curious Obsession on it, so it was drawing us double cards. It was great, and that was able to close out the game for us. In round 3, we probably played the silliest homebrew, but it was awesome. I love this guy. He always brings some fun stuff. This is the guy who went 4-0 with Gates. I love seeing their brews. I love seeing their decks, and they played a Gruul ramp deck. Now, we did end up winning 2-0, but this was a really cool deck that utilized aggressive mining to draw cards. So they were all about putting lands onto the battlefield, sacrificing them to draw cards, either finish the game with a really big Beanstalk Giant or use Living Twister to just bounce lands and do damage. It's really cool. So in game 1, we were just really able to fly over them. They had some ramp creatures like Llanowar Scout that allowed them to put lands onto the battlefield, but again, we were just flying over. They didn't really have any reach or anything like that, and they even admitted that their last match they lost to Spirits because they lacked reach, so maybe they'll consider that going forward. And then in game 2, we sideboarded in the Aether Gust just to disrupt their ramp spells, Witness to Protection in case they did get things like the Beanstalk Giant or the Living Twister out, and it was pretty much the same thing. They did end up resolving a Beanstalk Giant with 6 lands, so that was going to worry us, but then we were able to get Rattle Chains out there and just tap that down whenever they went to combat, or should I say before they went to combat. The game went on, we just flew over them, and then I felt so bad. I don't even know why I didn't let it resolve. They were tapped out completely. They played aggressive mining, and I was like, counter, and they were like, come on, I can't do anything, and I was like, you're right, but I already played the counter. So it was a good game. It was really fun to see, and I really hope that they refine the list and they're able to kind of play it more in the future. Then in round 4, it was our nemesis again, mono red. This time we were prepared mentally. We knew what we were going to see, and we played against it earlier, so we knew what to keep in our hand. And this actually helped us out because we won 2-1. It was really, really fun, really close games here. And so in game 1, it was pretty close. We had a very well-timed counter for their light up the stage to set them back and stop them getting off card advantage. And we had, of course, a Mausoleum Wanderer with Curious Obsession just to make sure that we kept drawing into counters to counter their key stuff, flew over them and took the game 1. Then in game 2 we sided an Aether Gust. I'm telling you, this card's a lifesaver, right, for pretty much hitting all their spells, and some witness protections again to get things like Eidolon, Torbrid, and things like that. We actually made a pretty big mistake on this one because we decided to play a Supreme Phantom on turn 2 rather than witness protection their Runaway Steamkin, and next turn when they untapped, they were able to pump that Steamkin, attack, get in damage, and then start removing the counters from Runaway Steamkin to make more mana, cast more spells, and it just like spiraled. And I was like, why? I should have just it's a tempo play. It was a perfect tempo play, but we just didn't witness protection them, and that ended up costing us the game as they were able to cast spells like Light Stage, redraw, make more mana, and kind of pseudo storm off for a while. So in game 3, we kept the same sideboard, and we definitely just kept a better mind going into it. Turn 1, we started off with Mausoleum Wanderer, and we protected the Wanderer on turn 2. They really wanted to get rid of our stuff, so on turn 2, we Rattle Chains to protect it. Then the next turn, we protected that Rattle Chains with another Rattle Chains, and by then, because their burn was focusing on our creatures and not on us, we felt really good about swinging in and going there. Again, we Aether Gust to light up the stage, which really, really set them back, and then when they tried to cast the light up the stage the next turn, we just countered it, and we just set them back so far that there was just no chance. And because they focused on attacking our creatures, and we did have the protection for them with Rattle Chains, it really just took a burn away from our face that might have gotten them a little bit closer to a victory. So what's the final word? Well, I know for a lot of y'all, and I know for me personally even, I have a local store championship and a local RCQ coming up. So I'm really looking at what decks I want to take, and I think this deck attacks a lot of the top decks right now. A lot of those ramp decks, a lot of green-based decks, and clearly, with the right sequencing, it can beat some of the lower ground decks like Mono Red and Boros. I don't know if it's going to be the meta destroyer. I don't know if it's going to be the deck to take, but it definitely feels like a solid deck. I mean, the deck consistently puts up 5-0s on MTGO leagues. It's always a presence in those online challenges, so I think it definitely rewards people who have experience with it and know how to sequence it, not only knowing your cards, but knowing the cards of your opponent and knowing what spells need to be countered and what can be resolved. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, and I never get tired of saying Island Go. So if you are a tempo player, if you have these spirits, if laying around, let's say you have Bant Spirits, I highly recommend Blue Spirits. Is just a lot more focused, and when I do play against Bant Spirits, I find that we're usually able to get under them and win those matches. I highly recommend Blue Spirits for people who love tempo, who have a good knowledge of the game, and again, who like to hold up that mana. So as usual, I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. Tell me what you thought of the deck. Tell me what you think of Mono Blue Spirits, how you think it's positioned in the meta, and if there's any cool spicy tech that you have in your deck or in your sideboard, and what deck you want me to cover next, and what deck you'd love me to see play at FNM. Now, of course, before we sign off, I have to give a big ol' shout out again to playingpioneer.com for sponsoring this video. Go over to their website, check out the accompanying article for this video, as well as other great articles, deck techs, and a Pioneer tier list. It's just really your one stop for everything Pioneer, so thank you, Playing Pioneer. And of course, none of this would be possible at all without my supporters on Patreon. For just $1 a month, you can gain access to all these perks. You can get your names in the credits like I'm about to read, and know that you're just helping out this content and you're supporting the channel. So let me shout out my patrons here: Jake Hudson, Bridger, also an elk, Virgil, 𝐂𝐚𝐬𝐿𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵, Ryota Ortiz, and Ryan Cross. Thank you so much for your support, and make sure you check out that Patreon link down in the description so that you can join the casual crew and become a patron. As always, make sure you give the video a like, make sure you subscribe for more videos, and I hope you enjoyed this one. I'm Casual Jake reminding you, don't forget to play your land drops, and I'll see you next time.